Dr. Kang Min-jun's hands had once been worth more than most people's lives. At 36, he was Seoul National University Hospital's youngest chief neurosurgeon. Medical journals called him the maestro. Colleagues whispered that his hands were blessed by God. Patients flew from Singapore, Dubai, Los Angeles just to have those hands reach into their skulls and perform miracles. Then came the tremor. It started 11 months ago. January 14th, 2:47 a.m., operating room 3, a routine aneurysm clipping that became a nightmare when the vessel ruptured. He'd done the procedure hundreds of times, but that night, exhausted from back-to-back surgeries, he'd made one miscalculation, one hesitation, one moment of imperfect judgment. Kim Sung-hee, 42 years old, mother of 2, dead on his table. The inquiry cleared him. Complications beyond surgeon's control, they said, but Min-jun knew better. He'd been tired. His focus had slipped for 3 seconds. 3 seconds that cost a woman her life. Now his hands betrayed him. The tremor came whenever he held surgical instruments. Fine motor control, the thing that made him exceptional, gone. Replaced by a barely visible shake that meant everything in neurosurgery. He'd hidden it for 11 months, delegated surgeries to residents with flimsy excuses, took administrative responsibilities, attended conferences, anything to avoid the operating room where his failure lived. Until today. Dr. Kang, we have a situation. Dr. Park Ji-won, the hospital director, stood in his office doorway looking grave. The board is concerned. You haven't operated in nearly a year. Questions are being asked. Min-jun kept his face neutral, hands clasped beneath his desk where Park couldn't see them. I've been focusing on training the next generation. My residents are excellent, because you trained them. Park stepped inside, closing the door. But the hospital's neurosurgery reputation is built on your name. We're losing patients to Samsung Medical Center. Donors are asking questions. The board wants you back in the OR. I understand. Do you? Park sat down, his expression softening. Min-jun, I've known you for 15 years. Something happened after the Kim case. Talk to Mum. There's nothing to discuss. The inquiry cleared me. I'm not talking about the inquiry. I'm talking about you. You look exhausted. You've lost weight. Your office light is on at midnight every night. Park paused. There's a researcher visiting from Kenya, Dr. Amara Ochieng. She's studying medical trauma and grief. Perhaps I don't need therapy. I didn't say therapy. She's conducting research interviews, voluntary, confidential. Several surgeons have participated. It might be helpful. Min-jun wanted to refuse, but Park's expression said this wasn't really optional. The board was watching. They needed their star surgeon functional again. I'll consider it, he said finally. Good. She's in the research. To wing, 3rd floor. I'll send her your contact information. After Park left, Min-jun stood at his window overlooking Seoul's sprawl. His reflection stared back, expensive suit, perfect posture, the image of success. Behind the glass, his hands trembled. Dr. Amara Ochieng had never been particularly interested in neurosurgeons. In her experience, they were arrogant, God-complex, riddled men who treated everyone else like intellectual children. She'd interviewed 47 medical professionals across 3 continents for her research on occupational trauma. Neurosurgeons were consistently the worst. Defensive, dismissive, emotionally constipated. But Seoul National University Hospital was prestigious, and her research grant required international data. So here she was in a too-cold office in the research wing reviewing files on potential interview subjects. Kang Min-jun's file was interesting. Brilliant career trajectory, published extensively. Surgical outcomes that seemed almost statistically impossible. Then 11 months ago, a patient death during what should have been routine surgery. Since then, no operations, just administrative work and teaching. Classic trauma response, avoidance, loss of confidence, probably untreated PTSD. Her phone buzzed. An email from the hospital director. Dr. Kang has agreed to meet with you. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., his office. Amara smiled. Agreed, not volunteered. She knew resistance when she saw it. She spent the evening preparing questions and reviewing the Kim Sung-hee case file. The inquiry report was textbook defensive, highlighting every correct decision, minimizing the error, emphasizing unpredictability. But between the lines, she read the truth. A surgeon who blamed himself for being human. The next evening, Amara arrived at Dr. Kang's office carrying her tablet and a small wooden box, She knocked once, then entered, without waiting. He stood by the window, tall, lean, impeccably dressed in a grey suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. When he turned, she was struck by two things: how young he looked despite his reputation, and how utterly exhausted his eyes were. Dr. Ochieng. His English was perfect, accent barely noticeable. Please, sit. Thank you for meeting with me, Kang. She settled into the chair across from his desk, deliberately casual. I know you're busy. Actually, I have plenty of time lately. A flash of something, bitterness, crossed his face before he controlled it. What exactly does your research entail? I'm studying how medical professionals process grief and trauma, specifically patient loss, how it affects practitioners psychologically, physically, professionally. She opened her tablet. In Kenya, we have different approaches to grief than what I've observed in Western or East Asian medical culture. I'm exploring whether those differences impact recovery. And you want to interview me because of Kim Sung-hee? Direct. She appreciated that. Yes, you're an exceptional surgeon who experienced a patient death and subsequently stopped operating. That's a significant career change. I'm interested in understanding the internal process. Min-jun's jaw tightened. The inquiry cleared me. Complications beyond my control. I'm not interested in the inquiry, I'm interested in you. How you experienced it. How you're experiencing it now. With respect, Dr. Ochieng, I don't see how discussing my feelings will contribute to scientific research. Amara leaned forward. Do your hands shake, Dr. Kang? The silence was deafening. His face remained impassive, but his fingers curled slightly against his desk. I've reviewed 47 cases of surgeons who experienced traumatic patient loss, she continued. 63% develop psychosomatic symptoms. Tremors are the most common in surgeons. It's a physical manifestation of psychological guilt, the body literalizing the fear of causing harm again. You're making assumptions. Am I? She held his gaze. When was the last time you operated, Kang? That's irrelevant to January 15th, 11 months ago. One day after Kim Sung-hee died. Amara softened her voice. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because I understand that Western medicine treats the mind and body as separate. But they're not. Your hands shake because your heart is broken, and no amount of pretending otherwise will fix it. Min-jun stood abruptly, turning back to the window. This interview is over. In Kenya, when someone experiences profound loss, we don't isolate them. We gather. We talk. We acknowledge the pain collectively. Grief isn't something to overcome alone. It's something to move through with community. This isn't Kenya. No, here you're expected to be perfect, infallible, godlike. She stood, placing the wooden box on his desk. But you're human, Kang, and humans make mistakes. The question is whether you'll let one mistake define the rest of your life. She moved toward the door, then paused. The box is kahawa, Kenyan coffee, best in the world. When you're ready to talk, really talk, call me. I'll make you a cup. She left before he could respond. Min-jun stared at the wooden box for a long time after she'd gone. Finally, he opened it. The rich smell of coffee beans filled his office. His hands didn't shake as he closed the box, but when he tried to pick up a pen to write notes, the tremor returned. He threw the pen across the room. Amara didn't expect to hear from Dr. Kang. In her experience, the most resistant subjects never followed up. She'd get her data from more willing participants and include him as a case study in avoidance behavior, so she was surprised when 3 days later he appeared at her office at 7 p.m. carrying 2 surgical journals and an exhausted expression. Is the coffee offer still available? He asked. She gestured to the chair. Always. While water boiled, she studied him. He'd loosened his tie, his hair was slightly disheveled, the carefully maintained armor showing cracks. I've been reading your published research, he said, holding up the journals. Your work on communal grief processing in East African medical communities is compelling. The outcomes are statistically significant. But you're skeptical about application to Korean culture. I'm skeptical about application to me. He accepted the coffee she handed him. I'm not good at community, talking about feelings. That's not how I was trained. How were you trained? To be perfect. To never make mistakes. To hold people's lives in my hands and never flinch. He sipped the coffee, and something in his expression shifted. This is excellent. Told you, best in the world. Amara sat across from him. Tell me about Kim Sung-hee. The question landed like a physical blow. Min-jun's hand tightened around the coffee cup. I don't... Tell me about her. Not the surgery. Her, as a person. He was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, she was a middle school teacher. Math. Her daughter wanted to be a surgeon. His voice cracked slightly. She told me that before the surgery. Said her daughter had watched a documentary about neurosurgery and decided that's what she wanted to do. Asked if I'd talk to her after recovery. Did you? She didn't recover. The words were flat, but his hands trembled around the cup. I told her family I was sorry. I gave them the inquiry results. I went to the funeral, then I stopped operating. Why? Because I can't guarantee it won't happen again. I can't promise the next patient's daughter won't lose her mother because I'm tired or distracted or imperfect for 3 seconds. He set down the coffee cup. My hands shake now. Did your research predict that? Yes, the body's way of protecting future patients from perceived danger. So I'm a danger. No, your guilt is trying to protect people by making you incapable of harming them, but it's also making you incapable of helping them. Amara leaned forward. Dr. Kang, how many successful surgeries did you perform before Kim Sung-hee? That's not how many. I don't count. Your CV says over 2,000. 2,000 people are alive because of your hands. 2,000 families didn't lose mothers, fathers, daughters, sons because of you. She held his gaze. One death doesn't erase 2,000 lives. Tell that to Kim Sung-hee's family. They don't blame you. I read the inquiry file. Her husband wrote a letter saying you did everything possible, that they understood the risks. Min-jun stood, pacing. That makes it worse. They forgave me, but I can't forgive myself. Because forgiving yourself means accepting that you're human, fallible, not a god. Amara stood too. In my culture, we have a concept, Ubuntu. I am because we are. You exist in relationship to others. Your worth isn't individual perfection, it's collective contribution. You've contributed immeasurably. One mistake doesn't erase that. Easy to say, harder to believe. Then let me help you believe it. He turned to face her, really face her. For the first time, she saw past the armor to the broken man underneath. How? He asked quietly. Let me study you, formally, not just interviews, active intervention. I want to try communal healing approaches adapted for Korean context. It won't be comfortable. You'll have to be vulnerable. But if it works, maybe you get your hands back. And if it doesn't work, then at least you'll know you tried, that you didn't let fear make your decisions. Min-jun studied her for a long moment. She wondered what he saw, a researcher, a therapist, a stranger offering impossible hope. Okay, he said finally, but confidentially. The hospital can't know I'm struggling. Doctor-patient privilege. Everything we discuss stays between us. He nodded, something like relief crossing his face. When do we start? Tomorrow, 6 p.m, bring comfortable clothes. We're not staying in the office. After he left, Amara sat with her coffee, processing. She'd expected resistance, defensiveness, typical neurosurgeon arrogance. Instead, she'd found a man drowning in guilt, desperate for someone to throw him a rope. She pulled out her research notes, adding observations, but beneath the clinical language, she wrote something else. He wants to heal. That's half the battle. The next evening, Min-jun arrived at the hospital's meditation garden wearing jeans and a sweater. The first time Amara had seen him out of a suit. He looked younger, more vulnerable. We're starting with something simple, she said, leading him to a quiet corner surrounded by bamboo. Breathing exercises. I know how to breathe. You know how to hyperventilate while pretending everything's fine. That's different. She sat cross-legged on the ground, gesturing for him to join her. In Kenyan healing practices, we believe breath connects body and spirit. When trauma fractures that connection, breathwork repairs it. Min-jun sat awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. This feels very non-scientific. Neuroscience supports breathwork for parasympathetic nervous system regulation. It reduces cortisol, increases vagal tone, helps with emotional regulation. She smiled. Is that scientific enough? Fine. What do I do? Close your eyes. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Focus only on the breath. Oh. He tried. After 30 seconds, his eyes opened. This isn't working. Because as you're thinking about it working instead of just breathing, try again. They practiced for 20 minutes. Min-jun struggled initially, his mind clearly racing, but gradually his breathing deepened. His shoulders relaxed. The perpetual tension in his jaw softened. "How do your hands feel?" Amara asked softly. He opened his eyes, looking down at his hands. They were still, completely still. "It's temporary," she said before hope could fully bloom. "The tremor will return when you're stressed, but this shows your body can remember steadiness. We just have to retrain it." Over the next 2 weeks, they met every evening. Breathing exercises evolved into guided meditation. Amara introduced gentle movement, Tai Chi principles adapted with Korean traditional practices. She taught him to notice tension in his body and release it consciously. Min-jun was a difficult student. He intellectualized everything, asked constant questions, resisted anything that felt emotional, but slowly, imperceptibly, he began to change. One evening, Amara brought a small drum to their session. "We're doing what?" Min-jun asked skeptically. "Rhythm therapy. In many African traditions, drumming's used for healing. It regulates heartbeat, releases tension, connects you to something primal." "I'm not drumming." "You're drumming," she handed him the drum, "or you can explain to the hospital board why you still can't operate." He took the drum. The first attempts were awkward, but as Amara drummed beside him, demonstrating patterns, something in him loosened. The rhythm bypassed his analytical mind, speaking to something deeper. They drummed for an hour. When they stopped, Min-jun's hands were steady. His face was flushed. He was almost smiling. That was, he searched for words, unexpected. Healing usually is. As weeks passed, their sessions deepened. Min-jun began talking, really talking, about Kim Sung-hee, about his fear, about the impossible standards he'd set for himself, about his father, also a surgeon, who taught him that excellence meant never failing. Amara listened without judgment. She shared her own stories, patients she'd lost during her medical training in Nairobi, the guilt she'd carried, how her grandmother had taught her that death was part of life's cycle, that doctors were guides, not gods. "In my culture," she said one evening, "we have funeral rites that last days. The whole community gathers. We talk about the deceased. We cry. We celebrate their life. We acknowledge the loss collectively. It's exhausting, but afterward you feel lighter." "We have funerals too." "Do you? Or do you have efficient ceremonies where everyone performs grief and then goes home to cry alone?" Min-jun was quiet. "The latter. Exactly. Grief needs space. Community. Witness. You went to Kim Sung-hee's funeral, performed your role as the surgeon, then isolated yourself for 11 months. Your body is still trying to grieve. So what do? We create a space for it. Together." The next session, Amara brought candles and photos she'd found of Kim Sung-hee from newspaper articles about the case. "We're going to honor her," Amara said simply. "Really honor her. Not as your failure, but as a life that mattered." Min-jun stared at the photos. Kim Sung-hee smiling with her students, at her daughters, graduation, hiking with her husband. "I can't. Tell me something good about her, something you remember." His voice was hoarse. She was brave. Before surgery, she wasn't scared. She said she trusted me completely. His hands trembled. "How could she trust me because you were trustworthy? You'd saved thousands. She had every reason to trust you. Her death wasn't betrayal. It was tragedy." Min-jun's control finally broke. Tears he'd held for 11 months spilled over. His shoulders shook. The armor shattered. Amara didn't speak. She simply moved closer, her presence a silent witness to his grief. They sat like that for a long time, a broken surgeon and a healer who understood that some wounds needed to be acknowledged before they could heal. 3 months into their sessions, something shifted. Min-jun's hands were steadier. Not perfect, but improving. He'd started reviewing surgical videos again, preparing to return to the OR. The hospital board was pleased with his progress, though they didn't know the source. But hospital politics were about to complicate everything. Amara's research grant was under review. Dr. Yoon, the head of hospital research, had questions about her methodology. "Your approach is too unconventional," Yoon said during a review meeting. "Drumming? Meditation? Where's the rigorous scientific framework?" "The results speak for themselves," Amara countered. Participants show measurable improvement in PTSD symptoms, decreased anxiety, improved occupational function, based on self-reporting. We need objective data, brain scans, hormone levels, controlled conditions. Dr. Yoon leaned back. I'm recommending we terminate your grant. This isn't research, it's spirituality. Min-jun, who'd been sitting silently in the meeting as department representative, spoke up. Dr. Ochieng's work has merit. Perhaps we need to expand our definition of rigorous research. Dr. Yoon's eyebrows rose. That's surprisingly progressive, Kang, though I hear you've been meeting with Dr. Ochieng frequently. Personal interest clouding professional judgment. The implication hung in the air. Min-jun's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. My interest is purely professional. Dr. Ochieng's research could benefit many medical professionals struggling with occupational trauma. Could, but without objective data, it's speculation. Dr. Yoon stood. The grant committee meets next week. Unless you can provide concrete evidence of efficacy, Dr. Ochieng, I'm afraid your time here is ending. After the meeting, Min-jun found Amara in her office, furiously typing notes. I'm sorry, he said. Yoon is old school. He doesn't understand. He doesn't need to understand. He needs data. She looked up, frustrated. I have qualitative data, patient testimonies, improvement metrics, but without neurological scans or hormonal panels, it's not considered real science. What if you had a case study with before and after scans? Someone whose improvement was measurable? Amara studied him. You? Me. That would require disclosing that you've been in treatment, that you had tremors, that you needed help. She shook her head. That could destroy your reputation. Or it could help other surgeons who are struggling in silence. Min-jun sat down. How many doctors do you think are suffering like I was? Hiding symptoms, avoiding patients, slowly dying inside because admitting weakness feels impossible? Many, but you don't have to sacrifice yourself for... Maybe I do. You threw me a rope when I was drowning. Let me do the same for others. Amara was quiet. This will have consequences. Professional, personal. Are you sure? Min-jun looked at his hands, steady for now. For the first time in 11 months, I feel like myself again. If sharing that helps your research continue and helps other doctors find what I found, then yes, I'm sure. Okay, we'll need comprehensive scans, interviews, documentation of the entire process. She met his eyes. Thank you. This is incredibly brave. Or incredibly stupid. Both. The best things usually are. Over the next week, they compiled Min-jun's case study. Brain scans showing decreased amygdala activation, cortisol levels normalizing, video documentation of tremor improvement. His testimony about the process. The grant committee meeting was tense. Dr. Yoon was skeptical until Min-jun presented his own case. I'm the subject, he said simply. 3 months ago, I couldn't hold surgical instruments without tremors. I hadn't operated in nearly a year. Dr. Ochieng's intervention changed that. The data is here. The improvement is measurable. This research works. The room went silent. Director Park looked stunned. You're admitting publicly that you've been impaired, Yoon asked. I'm admitting I'm human, that I experienced trauma and sought help. There's no shame in that. The board will have questions. My patients will have their surgeon back. That's what matters. The committee voted. Amara's grant was extended with conditions, more objective measures, larger sample size, but it was renewed. After the meeting, Min-jun and Amara walked through the hospital garden. It was late autumn, leaves turning gold and red. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. You gave me my life back. The least I could do was fight for your work. She stopped walking, turning to face him. It's more than that, though, isn't it? What do you mean? These sessions, they stopped being just research weeks ago. Her voice was soft. For both of us. Min-jun's heart raced. He'd been trying not to acknowledge the shift, how he looked forward to their evenings together, how her laugh made his chest tighten, how when she touched his hands to check steadiness, it felt electric. Amara, not yet. She smiled sadly. You're still healing, and I'm still your researcher. We can't, not while there's a professional dynamic. What about after, when the research concludes? Ask me then. That night, Min-jun couldn't sleep. He kept replaying her words, the look in her eyes. 3 months ago, he'd been a shell of himself. Now he felt alive in ways that had nothing to do with surgery. His phone buzzed. A message from the surgical coordinator. Emergency case, subdural hematoma. Patient is critical. Dr. Park requesting you specifically. His first instinct was panic, but then he remembered breathing exercises, Amara's voice guiding him through fear. He grabbed his keys and drove to the hospital. The patient was a 17-year-old girl, motorcycle accident, brain bleed. Without immediate surgery, she'd die or suffer permanent damage. Min-jun stood outside the OR scrubbing his hands. They were shaking. Dr. Kang? A resident approached nervously. Are you? Should I? I'm fine, he breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. The Tremor steadied. He entered the OR. The team looked uncertain. They had heard rumors about his hiatus. But Director Park stood by the patient, confidence in his eyes. She needs you, Park said simply. Min-jun took his position. Instruments were placed in his hands. For a moment, fear paralyzed him. What if he failed? What if his hands betrayed him? What if another family lost their daughter? Then he heard Amara's voice in his memory. One death doesn't erase 2,000 lives. He made the first incision. For the next 4 hours, Min-jun operated with the precision that had made him legendary. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. He was in flow, that state where time disappeared and there was only the surgery. When he finally sutured the last layer, the room exhaled collectively. Excellent work, Dr. Kang, the anesthesiologist said. Just like old times. Better than old times, Min-jun thought. Because this time he wasn't operating from ego or perfectionism. He was operating from hard-won humility and gratitude for the ability to help. The girl survived. Not just survived, thrived. Within days she was awake and joking with nurses. Her parents hugged Min-jun, crying with relief. That night he went to Amara's office. She was still working despite the late hour. I heard about the surgery, she said when he entered. Congratulations. I couldn't have done it without you. You absolutely could have. I just helped you remember what was already there. Min-jun moved closer. My hands were steady. The whole time, I kept hearing your voice, breathing. Ubuntu, I am because we are. You did the work, Min-jun. You faced your trauma. You let yourself heal. With you, the air between them charged. All the careful professional distance they'd maintained dissolved. Your research contract ends next month, Min-jun said quietly. Yes. And then? Then I go back to Kenya. My work here will be done. The words landed like a blow. You're leaving? That was always the plan. I'm a visiting researcher, not permanent staff. What if you stayed? Amara's eyes filled with something painful. And do what? Be your therapist forever? Watch you rebuild your life while I'm just there. Not my therapist, something else, someone else. He reached for her hand carefully. Giving her time to pull away, she didn't. I know it's complicated. I know I'm still healing. But these months with you have been everything. You didn't just give me back my hands. You gave me back myself. Min-jun. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. Just consider staying. We can figure out the rest. She was quiet for a long time. My life is in Kenya. My family, my community, my research base. I can't just abandon that. I'm not asking you to abandon anything. I'm asking if there's room in your life for this, for us. You don't even know what us means. 3 months ago you could barely look at your own hands. Now you're talking about a relationship? Because you taught me that healing isn't linear, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that needing someone doesn't make you less. He squeezed her hand gently. You taught me everything except how to let you go. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This is too fast, too complicated. Life is complicated. That doesn't make it less worth living. She pulled her hand away, standing. I need to think. I need time. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But as she walked away, Min-jun felt the familiar tremor return to his hands. Not from surgical trauma this time, from the fear of losing something precious before he'd fully realized its value. The next 2 weeks were agonizing. Amara threw herself into research, avoiding their usual sessions. Min-jun operated again, successfully, but every surgery felt hollow without her to share it with. Then crisis arrived in the form of a phone call. Amara's mother had collapsed in Nairobi. Stroke. She needed emergency surgery. Min-jun found Amara in her office, frantically booking flights, tears streaming down her face. "The surgeon there is good, but she needs the best. I can't lose her. I can't." Her voice broke. "Let me come with you." She looked up, startled. "What?" "I'm a neurosurgeon. If your mother needs surgery, I can help, or at minimum, I can consult, advise. You can't just fly to Kenya. Your patients, your responsibilities can wait. You need help. Let me provide it." "Why would you do this?" He moved closer, cupping her face gently. "Because you're important to me. Because your family is important to you. Because Ubuntu. I am because we are." Fresh tears fell. "You listened." "I always listen to you." They flew to Nairobi that night. On the plane, Amara slept against Min-jun's shoulder, exhausted from stress and fear. He stayed awake, one arm around her, feeling the weight of trust she'd placed in him. At Nairobi Hospital, Min-jun reviewed Amara's mother's scans. The stroke was serious but operable. The local surgeon was capable, but Min-jun's expertise was better suited for the delicate work required. "I'd like to perform the surgery," and he told Amara. "With your permission, Dr. Kimani can assist. Together, we'll give her the best possible outcome." Amara's family gathered. Siblings, cousins, her grandmother. They looked at this Korean stranger with skepticism until Amara's grandmother spoke in Swahili. Amara translated. "She says she sees healing in your hands, that you carry medicine and pain both. She trusts you." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Min-jun operated with everything he'd learned. Technical skill honed over decades, humility earned through failure, steadiness reclaimed through Amara's guidance. When he finally emerged, Amara's family surrounded him. Her mother would recover. The surgery was successful. Amara hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You saved me first. This is just returning the favor." They stayed in Nairobi for a week while her mother recovered. Min-jun met Amara's massive extended family, attended communal meals, experienced Ubuntu in its authentic context. He saw where she came from, the warmth, the community, the healing traditions she'd tried to bring to Seoul. One evening, sitting with Amara's grandmother, the old woman spoke. Amara translated. "She says you and I are mirrors, both healers, both wounded, both learning that strength comes from acknowledging brokenness." Amara's voice softened. "She says some people meet by chance. Others meet because their souls agreed to find each other." Min-jun looked at Amara. "What do you believe?" "I believe I've spent 3 months trying not to fall in love with you, and I believe I failed spectacularly." He laughed, relief flooding through him. "Good, because I failed at that too. This is still complicated. International relationship, cultural differences. Your career in Seoul, my life here. Complicated isn't impossible. We'll figure it out." "How?" "The same way I learned to operate again. One breath at a time, one day at a time, together." She kissed him then, surrounded by family and laughter and the smell of her grandmother's cooking. It felt like coming home. 6 months later. Dr. Kang Min-jun stood before a conference of medical professionals, presenting his case study. "For 11 months, I couldn't operate due to trauma-induced tremors," he said calmly. "I thought my career was over. Then Dr. Amara Ochieng introduced me to communal healing practices that addressed not just symptoms, but root causes. Today I operate regularly. My hands are steady, and I'm helping establish a program at Seoul National University Hospital for medical professionals experiencing occupational trauma." The audience applauded. In the front row, Amara smiled. After the presentation, colleagues approached, with questions. Several admitted privately to their own struggles. Min-jun directed them to the new support program, staffed by therapists trained in Amara's methods. That evening, they walked through Seoul together. Amara had accepted a permanent position at the hospital, developing her research program. She split her time between Seoul and Nairobi, bridging both worlds. "Your grandmother was right," Min-jun said, "about souls agreeing to find each other." "She's annoyingly right about most things," Amara leaned against him. "Though she still can't believe I'm dating a neurosurgeon. She thinks you're all arrogant." "I am arrogant, just less so now." "Growth," she laughed. His phone buzzed. Emergency surgery request. A patient specifically asking for him. "Go," Amara said. "Save lives. I'll be here when you're done." Min-jun kissed her forehead. "I'll cook dinner after. That Kenyan stew you taught me. Please don't." Last time you nearly burned down your kitchen? I'm a surgeon, not a chef. Clearly. She pushed him gently toward the hospital. Go, your hands are needed. He looked down at his hands, steady, strong, purposeful, then back at her, the woman who'd given him not just steadiness but meaning. I love you, he said. I know. Now go before your patient dies, waiting for your dramatic declarations. He laughed and ran toward the hospital. The surgery was complex, a tumor wrapped around critical blood vessels. 2 years ago, Min-jun would have approached it with cold precision, treating it like a technical challenge. Now he thought about the patient's family in the waiting room, the husband who'd held his wife's hand before anesthesia, the daughter who looked exactly like Kim Sung-hee's daughter had in photos. He breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. His hands moved with practiced grace, but this time there was something more than skill. There was compassion. There was humility. There was the understanding that he was part of something larger, a web of connection where his gift was meant to serve, not to prove his worth. 6 hours later, he emerged victorious. The tumor was removed. The patient would recover. In the scrub room, Dr. Park found him. Beautiful work, Min-jun. You're better than ever. I'm different than ever. Better is subjective. Park smiled. The board wants to offer you the chief of surgery position. Full department oversight. It's a significant promotion. A year ago, Min-jun would have accepted immediately. Power, prestige, validation, everything he'd built his identity around. Now he hesitated. Can I think about it? Park looked surprised. Of course. Take your time. That night, Min-jun went home to find Amara had let herself in with the key he'd given her. She was cooking, actually cooking, unlike his disasters, and their apartment smelled like spices and warmth. How was surgery? She asked. Successful, and I got offered chief of surgery. She turned from the stove, eyes wide. Min-jun, that's incredible. That's everything you've worked for. Is it? He sat at the kitchen counter. A year ago, yes. Now I'm not sure. Chief of surgery means more administration, less operating, more politics. I finally got my hands back. I don't know if I want to spend my time in board meetings. Amara moved to stand beside him. What do you want? I want to operate. I want to help establish the trauma support program. I want to train residents who understand that being a good surgeon isn't about perfection. It's about compassion. He pulled her closer. And I want time with you. Real time, not stolen hours between endless responsibilities. You can have both. Accept the position. Delegate the politics. Focus on what matters. Or I can decline and stay where I am. Operating, teaching, living. She studied his face. You've really changed. You changed me. No, I just helped you become who you already were underneath the armor. She kissed him softly. Whatever you decide, I support you. But don't make decisions based on what you think you should want. Decide based on what actually brings you joy. You bring me joy. Besides me, narcissist. He laughed. Operating brings me joy. Teaching brings me joy. Helping other doctors who are struggling, that brings me profound joy. The title, the prestige, I don't think I care anymore. Then you have your answer. The next day, Min-jun declined the chief of surgery position. Instead, he proposed an alternative, a new role focused on surgical education and the trauma support program. Part-time operating, part-time teaching, full-time meaning. The board was surprised but accepted. Min-jun was too valuable to lose even if he wasn't following the traditional path. Dr. Yoon cornered him after the meeting. You're making a mistake. Men like you are meant to lead departments, not coddle residents and run support groups. Men like me almost destroyed themselves chasing that definition of success, Min-jun replied calmly. I'm choosing a different path. Because of the African woman. The racism was casual, almost unconscious. Min-jun felt his old anger rise, the instinct to put Yoon in his place with cutting words. Instead, he breathed. Dr. Ochieng is a brilliant researcher who saved my career and probably my life. My decisions are my own, but her influence has made me better at everything I do. If you see that as weakness, that's your limitation, not mine. He walked away before Yoon could respond. That evening, Min-jun and Amara hosted a dinner for the first cohort of the trauma support program. 8 medical professionals, surgeons, residents, nurses, all struggling with occupational trauma. They gathered in Amara's apartment, sharing a meal she'd prepared with Min-jun's clumsy assistance. The atmosphere was tentative at first. Medical professionals weren't trained to be vulnerable with each other. But Amara guided these conversation with practiced skill. She asked questions. She shared her own experiences losing patients in Kenya. She created space for honesty. One by one they opened up. A resident who'd made a medication error. A nurse who'd watched too many patients die during COVID. A surgeon whose hands had started shaking after a catastrophic outcome. Min-jun listened mostly, adding his perspective when helpful. But the real magic was watching these isolated professionals realize they weren't alone, that their struggles weren't unique, that healing was possible. After everyone left, Amara collapsed on the couch, exhausted but satisfied. "That was good," she said. "They needed that." Min-jun sat beside her, pulling her close. "You're building something important here." "We're building something important. This is partnership, remember?" "Ubuntu." "Exactly." She shifted to look at him. "I got an email today. University of Nairobi wants me to establish a similar program there. 6-month contract starting next year." His heart sank. 6 months? I'd come back, but it would mean time apart. She bit her lip. "Unless you could come with me, take a sabbatical. You've never been to Kenya for more than a week. Leave Seoul for 6 months. Leave your comfort zone for 6 months. Experience my world fully. Operate in a different medical system. Learn from healers who have been practicing communal medicine for generations." She touched his face. "I'm not asking you to abandon your life. I'm asking you to expand it." Min-jun thought about the offer. A year ago, it would have been impossible. His identity was so wrapped up in Seoul National University Hospital, in his reputation, in the carefully constructed image of excellence. Now? "When would we leave?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Completely. You came to Korea for your research. Let me come to Kenya for mine. I want to learn from your grandmother's healing practices. I want to understand Ubuntu in its original context. I want to see where you come from. The hospital will never approve, then I'll take unpaid leave, or resign if I have to. Life is too short to let institutions make my decisions." He kissed her. "You taught me that." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're impossible. You love impossible." "Unfortunately, yes." 3 months later, Nairobi, Kenya. Min-jun stood in a surgical theatre at Kenyatta National Hospital, teaching a room full of residents. The facilities were different from Seoul, fewer resources, older equipment, but the dedication was identical. "The technique is the same," he explained in English, Amara translating occasional medical terms to Swahili. "But your approach must adapt to circumstances. In Seoul, I had every possible tool. Here, you work with what you have. That requires creativity, not just technical skill." After the teaching session, he scrubbed in for surgery. The patient was a young man injured in a traffic accident, similar to cases he'd handled hundreds of times, but operating in a different context with different staff, different equipment, reminded him that medicine was both universal and deeply contextual. His hands were steady throughout, no tremor, no fear, just the flow state he'd reclaimed. In the evenings, Min-jun studied with Amara's grandmother and other traditional healers. They taught him about herbal medicine, spiritual practices, the connection between community wellness and individual healing. "Western medicine treats the body," the grandmother said through Amara's translation. "But the body doesn't exist alone. It exists in relationship to family, community, ancestors, land. Healing must address all these connections." Min-jun, who'd spent his career focused solely on neurological structures, found his worldview expanding in uncomfortable and beautiful ways. One night, sitting with Amara on her family's compound, watching stars impossible to see in Seoul's light pollution, he said, "I understand now why you do what you do, why your research matters so much. 'Cause Western medicine is incomplete? 'Cause all medicine is incomplete. We need multiple approaches. Technical skill and communal healing, science and spirituality, individual treatment and collective care." He squeezed her hand. "You're not trying to replace one with the other. You're trying to integrate them." "Finally, he gets it," she laughed. "Only took you a year and moving to a different continent." "I'm a slow learner." "You're a traumatized perfectionist learning to embrace complexity. That takes time." His phone buzzed. An email from Seoul National University Hospital. Director Park writing with unexpected news. Min-jun, the board has approved a new position. Director of Integrated Medical Wellness. It's a hybrid role, combining surgery, education, and the trauma support program. We want you to develop a comprehensive approach to physician wellness, incorporating diverse healing modalities. The board was impressed by your work in Kenya. We'd like you to bring those insights back to Seoul. Think about it. No pressure, but we need doctors like you leading us into the future. Min-jun showed the email to Amara. That's incredible, she said. Exactly what you've been working toward. What we've been working toward, he corrected. This only exists because of you, your research, your vision. Our vision, she smiled. Are you going to accept? I don't know. I love what I'm doing here. Working with fewer resources forces me to be creative. The traditional healers are teaching me things I never learned in medical school. And your family, he gestured to the compound where her relatives were gathered, talking and laughing. This sense of community, of connection, it's healing in ways I'm still discovering. But Seoul is your home. Seoul is where I live. I'm starting to think home is more complicated than geography. They sat in school, comfortable hands. In the distance, someone was playing a drum, the same kind Amara had introduced him 2 months ago. The rhythm was steady, grounding, connecting. What if we split our time? Amara suggested. 6 months in Seoul developing the integrated wellness program. 6 months here continuing the research and supporting Kenya's medical community. We build something sustainable in both places. That's a lot of travel, a lot of complexity. Life is complex, we've established that. Min-jun pulled her closer. A year ago, I was alone in my office, unable to touch surgical instruments, convinced my life was over. Now I'm in Kenya, planning international programs, in love with a brilliant researcher who somehow convinced me that healing isn't linear and perfection is overrated. It sounds like character growth. It sounds like you saved me. We saved each other. That's how Ubuntu works. 6 months later, they returned to Seoul. Min-jun stepped into his new role as Director of Integrated Medical Wellness. The position was unconventional, combining surgery, education, traditional healing practices, and psychological support. The first program he launched was a mandatory wellness curriculum for all residents. No longer was medicine just about technical skills. Now it included modules on recognizing trauma, processing grief, seeking help, and understanding that doctors were human. Some senior surgeons objected. Dr. Yoon called it soft medicine and a waste of time. But the younger generation embraced it. Residents started talking openly about their struggles. Suicide rates among medical staff began declining. Patient care improved when doctors addressed their own trauma instead of suppressing it. Amara's research program expanded, now with significant funding. She trained therapists in communal healing approaches adapted for Korean medical culture. The trauma support groups multiplied. And on Tuesday evenings, Min-jun still operated. Because surgery was his first love, his gift, the thing that made him feel most alive besides Amara. One evening after a particularly complex operation, he found Amara waiting in his office with Kenyan coffee and that smile that still made his heart race. Good surgery? She asked. Perfect surgery. Then he corrected himself. No, not perfect. Good enough. Successful. The patient will recover. That's all that matters. Look at you embracing imperfection. You're a terrible influence. The best kind. She handed him coffee. I have news. The International Journal of Medical Humanities accepted our joint paper. The one about integrated healing approaches. The one where we argue that Western medicine's obsession with individual pathology misses the communal dimension of healing. That's the one. It's going to piss off a lot of people. Good. Medicine needs disrupting, she laughed. Who are you, and what did you do with the perfectionist neurosurgeon I met 2 years ago? You destroyed him, rebuilt him, made him better. We destroyed him, rebuilt him, made us better. Min-jun set down his coffee and pulled her close. Marry me. The words surprised them both. What? Marry me. Not because it's traditional or expected, not because we're supposed to, but because I want to build this life with you permanently, across continents, across cultures, through complexity and chaos and everything we haven't figured out yet. Amara's eyes filled with tears. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. I'm a neurosurgeon, not a poet. You're my neurosurgeon. She kissed him. Yes, obviously yes. They married 6 months later in a ceremony that blended Korean and Kenyan traditions. His family looked confused by the African drumming. Her family looked overwhelmed by the formal Korean bows. Everyone looked happy. Director Park gave a speech about how Min-jun had transformed the hospital's approach to physician wellness. Amara's grandmother spoke about souls that agreed to find each other. Deong, Min-jun's oldest friend, cried embarrassingly, and Min-jun, standing beside Amara, felt something he'd spent years chasing through surgical excellence and professional validation. Peace. Not the peace of perfection, the peace of acceptance, of being fully known and fully loved, of understanding that his worth wasn't measured by surgical outcomes or professional titles, but by connection, contribution, and the courage to keep healing. 5 years later. Dr. Kang Min-jun walked through Seoul National University Hospital's new integrated wellness center. The facility was beautiful. Meditation spaces beside surgical simulators, traditional Korean healing rooms near state-of-the-art medical technology, art therapy studios down the hall from neuroscience labs. But the real beauty was in the people. Medical students practicing breathwork between anatomy classes, residents attending grief processing groups alongside surgical training, senior surgeons drumming with junior nurses, breaking down hierarchies that had defined medicine for generations. In his office, Min-jun reviewed the latest data. Since the integrated wellness program launched, physician burnout rates had decreased by 40%. Medical errors had dropped significantly. Patient satisfaction scores had risen. And perhaps most importantly, doctors were staying in the profession instead of leaving from exhaustion and trauma. Still staring at numbers like they'll reveal the meaning of life? Amara entered carrying their 2-year-old daughter, Makina, a name meaning happy one in Kikuyu. The numbers tell a good story, Min-jun said, reaching for his daughter. She grabbed his nose immediately, laughing. Numbers tell part of the story. The full story is in the people. Amara gestured to the window overlooking the wellness center. Look at them, actually healing, actually living. We built something good. We built something necessary. There's a difference. Makina squirmed, wanting down. Min-jun set her on the floor where she immediately started exploring his office with fearless curiosity. She has your confidence, Min-jun observed. She has your stubbornness, Amara countered. Perfect combination. His phone buzzed. A text from a former resident. Thank you for everything to Kang, starting my own practice. Using everything you taught me, medical and otherwise. You saved my career. Messages like that arrived regularly now. Doctors whose lives had been changed by the integrated approach. Patients whose care had improved because their doctors were healing too. Do you ever think about Kim Sung-hee? Amara asked quietly, reading his expression. Every day, every surgery. Min-jun watched Makina investigate his bookshelf. But now it's different. Before, I thought about her with guilt and shame. Now I think about her with gratitude. Gratitude? Her death broke me. That brokenness led me to you, to this work, to helping thousands of other medical professionals avoid the isolation and trauma I experienced. Her tragedy became a catalyst for change. That doesn't make her death good, but it makes the outcome meaningful. Amara moved to stand and beside him. You've healed. We've healed. Together. Like you said from the beginning, Ubuntu. I am because we are. That evening, they hosted a dinner for the first cohort from the trauma support program. The same doctors who'd gathered nervously 5 years ago. Now they were confident practitioners, many running their own wellness programs in other hospitals. They gathered in Min-jun and Amara's home, sharing a meal and stories. The resident who'd made a medication error was now a confident attending physician who'd established peer support programs at 3 hospitals. The nurse who'd struggled during COVID was teaching resilience workshops internationally. The surgeon with trembling hands was operating again, mentoring others through similar trauma. To Dr. Kang and Dr. Ochieng, someone toasted, for showing us that being broken isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of a better one. Glasses clinked. Makina banged on her high chair, wanting to participate. After everyone left, Min-jun and Amara stood on their balcony overlooking Seoul's glittering expanse. Somewhere in that city, doctors were operating, saving lives, struggling with impossible pressures. But now at least they had support. They had community. They had permission to be human. Do you ever regret it? Amara asked. Giving up the traditional path? You could have been chief of surgery. You could have focused purely on technical excellence. I chose a different kind of excellence. The kind that acknowledges that we're all connected, that healing one person helps heal many, that vulnerability is strength. He pulled her close. I regret nothing except the years I spent thinking perfection mattered more than connection. That's growth. That's you, teaching me, challenging me, loving me despite my arrogance and resistance. Because of your arrogance and resistance, they made the transformation more impressive. He laughed. I love you. I know. You tell me approximately every 2 hours. Just making sure you don't forget. Impossible, you're very persistent. Inside, Makina started crying, the tired cry that meant bedtime. They moved inside together, a united front against toddler resistance. As Min-jun rocked his daughter to sleep singing a Korean lullaby Amara had taught him with Swahili words woven in, he thought about the journey. From broken surgeon to healed healer. From isolated perfectionist to connected human. From trembling hands to steady purpose. The tremor had been a gift, ultimately. It forced him to stop, to face himself, to accept help. It led him to Amara, to Ubuntu, to a completely different understanding of what it meant to be a doctor and a man. His hands were steady now, but more importantly, his heart was full. Makena fell asleep against his chest, her breathing deep and trusting. Min-jun looked up to find Amara watching from the doorway, that expression on her face, love mixed with satisfaction at witnessing the impossible become real. What are you thinking? He whispered. That your hands were never really broken. They were just waiting for the right reason to heal. You're my reason. Oh, you're your reason. I just helped you remember. They stood there in the soft light of their daughter's room, two healers who'd found each other across continents and cultures, who'd built something beautiful from brokenness, who'd learned that the most profound healing came not from perfection, but from connection. Outside, Seoul hummed with endless possibility. Inside, a family breathed in synchronized peace, and in hospitals across the city, doctors were learning what Min-jun had discovered, that admitting vulnerability wasn't weakness, that seeking help wasn't failure, that the hands that saved lives sometimes needed saving themselves. The tremor had taught him everything he needed to know about being human, and being human, it turned out, was the most important qualification for being a healer. The end. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and love. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of hope, transformation, and the power of human connection. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember, we are all healers and we are all wounded. And sometimes, that's exactly what makes us qualified to help each other. See you in the next story.